Hello YouTube! Today I want to share with you my enthusiasm about a book I just finished. It's the first tome of Haruki Murakami's 1Q84. So here I'm showing you the French cover, but I think the title is the same worldwide. So I know these books have been out for a while and that I haven't even finished the series yet, but I really couldn't wait to share with you my enthusiasm because I've been loving it so far. I've been a big fan of Murakami's work for over 10 years now. So if you have never heard of him, he's a very popular Japanese novelist. He started writing in the late 70s and has been consistently publishing since. Most of his stories have been bestsellers worldwide and his work has been translated in over 50 languages. He's also considered to be an important figure of postmodern literature. He has received a variety of prizes along his career and has even been named on the Times 100 Most Influential People for 2015. His most famous work includes A Wild Ship Chase, Norwegian Wood, The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, Kafka on the Shore, and 1Q84. So his novels are characterized by the intrusion of a fantastic element in an otherwise very realistic setting. Although I doubt that was one of his influence, it really makes me think of the work of the surrealists. The themes of alienation and loneliness are central to his narratives. So for the story, I discovered his work when I was living in Japan and I was seeing many of my co-workers reading his novels. I was lucky enough to have a huge bookstore nearby called Kinokuniya that stored some books in French. The first book I've ever read from him is called Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World, and I immediately fell in love with his writing. So, first published in 1985, Hard-Boiled Wonderland is a strange and dreamlike novel. Its chapters alternate between two narratives. So Hard-Boiled Wonderland is the story of Calculek, who works for the government as a data processor and uses his subconscious as an encryption key. And then The End of the World is the story of a newcomer to a strange and isolated town where people the shadow have been cut off. The two stories eventually converge and you start exploring the concepts of the unconscious mind and identity. If you want more information on this novel, I will put the link to the Wikipedia page in the description box below. It has helped me a lot to remember all of the details I was fuzzy on. So going back to 1Q84, it was first published in Japan between 2009 and 2010, then in English and in French in 2011. It's a 3-volume novel organized chronologically. The title is a play on the Japanese pronunciation of the year 1984, because in Japanese the number 9 is pronounced Q. It's also a reference, obviously, to George Orwell's 1984. So as I've told you in the introduction, I've only read the first book so far. Since I already loved the author, I went into the book without doing any research on what the story was about. And for once, unlike with all the A Song of Ice and Fire stuff, I'd like to remain unspoiled, so please keep that in mind in the comments. That's my cat. So the first book covers a period going from April to June 1984, and the story is told through the eyes of two alternating characters, a woman named Aomame and a man named Tengo. For the entirety of the first book, their stories won't intersect, but you can see their connection slowly being woven in between the two characters. So I won't try to give you any kind of a summary because it's not a plot-heavy story. And I feel it would be really difficult for me to tell you what happens without ruining the surprises. So I'll just tell you that the story opens right in the middle of the action as Aomame is stuck in traffic while she has to arrive on time for a very important meeting for which she cannot be late. So instead of summarizing the story, I will tell you why I really love this book. and that is my cat making noise in the background. So the first thing I love in this novel is the language. For those of you who don't know anything about Japanese, it's a language that's a unique quality, to my knowledge, at least, to be able to convey a lot of a person's relationship with his surrounding. When you listen to a conversation in Japanese, you realize how many of the words are used simply to convey the relationship between the persons talking. Going back to the book, I have read this book in French, but you can definitely tell that it was originally written in Japanese, and I mean that in the best possible way. I can give nothing but praise to the work of Hélène Morita, who translated it. The way the book is written, you can tell how lonely our two protagonists are without them even having to mention it. The music of the language conveys perfectly the tone of that constant inner monologue. It's almost like the sound of the waves relentlessly crashing on the shore that Tengo mentions in the book. Each character has his unique voice, and although you don't get inside their heads, you can really see what they have lived by the way they speak. No matter how quirky or anachronistic some of them might seem to us Western readers, you can always relate to them because their voice gives them life on paper. Another thing I love about this book and Murakami's work in general is how masterfully he weaves the Freudian concept of uncanny into his narrative. For the anecdote, this word has no equivalent in French, so we use the German term. For those not familiar with the concept, in his essay, Freud analyzes the anxiety born of a disruption in the reassuring reality of everyday life. The events told in 1Q84 are mostly fairly mundane. We see people giving a class, having tea, going to bars to meet strangers for sex, talking, taking public transportation or being stuck in traffic, sitting at their desk trying to write a novel, receiving phone calls. Aomame and Tengo's life have nothing exceptional, but you get that feeling that things might break just at any time. Piece by piece, the author introduces elements that make you wonder about the reality of what they're experiencing. Although I'm not typically a fan of fantastical literature, I've always been fascinated by stories who explore the borders of reality, whether in its relationship with madness or with dreams. For example, I also love Dostoevsky's Note from the Underground, or pretty much anything from Borges or Kafka. So I'd like to finish this review by giving you two quotes that, although they won't reveal anything about the plot, I feel encapsulate pretty well the general atmosphere of the book. So the first passage I want to read for you is from the very first chapter of the book, as Aomame is sitting in a cab and she's stuck in traffic. Aomame nodded and leaned back in her seat. There was something about the driver's way of speaking that bothered her, as though he were leaving something important unsaid. For example, and this is just one example, his remark on Toyota's impeccable sound insulation might be taken to mean that some other Toyota feature was less than impeccable. And each time he finished a sentence, there was a tiny but meaningful lump of silence left behind. This lump floated there, enclosed in the car's restricted space, like an imaginary miniature cloud, giving Aomame a strangely unsettled feeling. "It certainly is a quiet car," Aomame declared, as if to sweep the little cloud away. "And the stereo looks especially fine." "Decisiveness was key when I bought it," the driver said, like a retired staff officer explaining his past military success. "I have to spend so much time in here. I want the best sound available and..." Aomame waited for what was to follow, but nothing followed. She closed her eyes again and concentrated on the music. She knew nothing about Janacek as a person, but she was quite sure that he never imagined that in 1984 someone would be listening to his composition in a hushed Toyota Crown Royal Saloon on the gridlocked elevated Metropolitan Expressway in Tokyo. Why though, Aomame wondered, had she instantly recognized the piece to be Janáček's Sinfonietta? And how did she know it had been composed in 1926? She was not a classical music fan, and she had no personal recollections involving Janáček, yet the moment she heard the opening bars, all her knowledge of the piece came to her by reflex, like a flock of birds swooping through an open window. The music gave her an odd, wrenching kind of feeling. There was no pain or unpleasantness involved, just a sensation that all the elements of her body were being physically wrung out. Aomame had no idea what was going on. Could Sinfonietta actually be giving me this weird feeling? So that's all for today. I hope you liked that kind of video. I wanted to give a special shout out to the lovely Bardi Porto who encouraged me to make this book review video. Once I'm done with these books, I think I'd like to read either John Dos Passos' Manhattan Transfer or anything by Thomas Pynchon. Watching the movie Inherent Vice really made me want to read these books. If you've read anything by Haruki Murakami, please let me know which one is your favorite in the comments, and also don't hesitate to give me some books recommendations. So thank you for watching, and bye bye YouTube!